Why, hello everyone.
Welcome all to DnDTime Talks, where we discuss all things Dungeons and Dragons. I am Pete.
And I am. Oh shit. You know, Pete, I had a thing planned where I was gonna cut you off and be like, I'm Pete, but I forgot. So I guess I'm just Jeremy.
I mean, fair enough. I guess I'm glad you forgot. Sorry, I was a little slow on the intro there. I was clicking my thing to get up all the information that we have to talk about tonight, and I just misclicked and I got the wrong thing. But now
it's the worst feel.
It is still the worst feel. It's like top 5 worst feels in the whole world.
But you know what's above that on the worst feels? Running into a beholder in an alleyway. Speaking of beholders, tonight's topic is Aberrations. We're going to be talking about monsters in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, part of an ongoing series that we're doing, where Pete and I just kind of like pick a type of monster, like in this case, Aberrations. Last week we talked about monstrosities, and we talk about some of our favorite examples of those creatures from the various different books that have been released for D&D thus far. And we talk about some cool ways that we would personally use those in our campaigns. And hopefully this will be cool to help inspire you folks out there to use these monsters in cool and exciting ways. So, I mean, I don't know about you, Pete, but I love monsters. Well, I mean, okay, I loved monstrosities last week.
Monstrosities are my favorite. I'm not going to jump back on that.
Aberrations might be my second favorite.
I think if I had to pick a second favorite, it would either be...
It'd be plants. It's plants.
I was going to say humanoids or devils or fae. I love Aberrations. I don't know. I like all of those things. I'll put all of those in kind of a second tier.
Pete, if I understand what you're saying here, I'm a flump. Flumps are aberrations. Aberrations aren't your favorite. I'm not your favorite.
No. I'm sorry.
Fuck you, Pete.
but not fuck you. But Jeremy, you're also an owlbear, and owlbears are my favorite. So.
That's true. Hey, I see we got Wyvern, Psychopath, and D-Frog hanging out in chat. How you guys doing tonight? And anyone else who's just lurking, I'm also saying hello to you. Just not quite as explicitly as I am to them, because they're
because we don't know how to say it explicitly to you. So we're gonna jump in soon. If you have any thoughts or questions or opinions on the things that we're talking about, please speak up and let us know. Also, if you just have like, hey, next week do another monster, or just any thoughts about what you want us to talk about, let us know on chat, let us know on Twitter. You want to start hopping in, Jeremy?
You know what? I think now is as good a time as ever to start talking about Aberrations. So,
take it away.
For those who may not be familiar, Aberrations are a classification, or a subtype, rather, of monsters. I guess really they're a type of monsters in Dungeons & Dragons, specifically in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. They've existed forever, as long as the game has been a thing. Through all of the editions. And they're some of the most classic monsters in Dungeons & Dragons. As we said earlier, we're really going to be talking about our favorite aberrations and some cool and interesting ways to engage those creatures with your players, right? How to use these in fun and exciting and novel ways.
Yeah. Aberrations, like Jeremy said, they're super iconic to D&D. They're very inspired by kind of the works of H.P. Lovecraft, I think is a huge influence on the whole aberrant category. But also there's so many aberrations that are just, they are synonymous with the brand of Dungeons and Dragons. They make great villains. They're fun to build stories around because they're so strange, and they're just really good if you want to spook your players. If you want to really freak them out, there's some aberrations in there that just the physical description of what it looks like will be enough to kind of weird your players out.
Yes, and I mean, all of these monster series obviously have a bent towards dungeon masters, but they're also super helpful for players. If you're a player, it's never going to hurt you to understand these monsters a little better, and to have that kind of background. It can help you to make some cool and interesting character choices when you're making your character or as you're playing, and it gives you just an understanding of how the games really work, or how the creatures in the game really work. So without further ado, let's jump right into the very fundamental basics. What defines an aberration? When we talked last week, we were talking about monstrosities, and monstrosities were really just everything that didn't fit in another category.
Yeah.
So the next question is, well, what's an aberration? And in a way, it's the exact same definition, right? It's something that doesn't fit into any other category. It is aberrant, right? It is unusual. However, it's more than just that. In the lore of Dungeons and Dragons, in the mythos, aberrations are creatures that come from a place called the Far Realm. That is basically the outer space of D&D. It is an inscrutable, bizarre outer area. So there's the prime material plane, which is like Earth, right? We'll say prime material plane's Earth. And then there's the elemental chaos. We're going to call that, for in our Earth analogy, we'll call it like the asteroid belt around the sun. And those are both things that we as people on Earth can like comprehend to some degree. Then there's the outer planes, things like Mount Celestia or the Nine Hells, or Mechanus or something like that. Those would be like the other planets in the solar system. Again, those are pretty far out, but they're things that we can comprehend. Like we can build little dioramas that show these outer planes and such, or these comparisons. And then there's the Far Realm, which is like everything else in all of existence in reality. Which, like, it's like, ah, yes, dark matter and wormholes and like stuff that as a person, as a human being on Earth, you can't really physically comprehend. You can't understand, well, what tangibly is dark matter? That's not something that like works in your mind unless you are, a rocket scientist. You study theoretical physics, maybe you can get that. And that's what the Far Realm is to Dungeons and Dragons. It is this inscrutable, otherworldly area that is all of the rest of existence that isn't existence.
Yes, and aberrations are residents of this other place that have, through some strange means, through one way or another, found themselves now in the material plane. And I think, is every example of aberration supposed to be from the Far Realm specifically, or is it also just imply?
They could just be extraplanar.
I mean, yeah,
there's work it in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the things we'll talk about eventually, is that, like monsters, aberrations are easy to kind of float around with because of how strange they are. But kind of the key factor of them is that they are these alien beings. And they are all kind of alien in different ways, but all of them are completely different. Like, for example, some ways that things are alien are they can be very alien of their physical form. Monstrosities such as the Beholder is the #1 most iconic aberration, possibly the most iconic thing in Dungeons and Dragons, save maybe the dragon. The Beholder is just this kind of floating massive eyeball with teeth and then more of these stalks of eyeballs coming out of it. That's not a form that can exist. That's not something that could ever function in nature. It doesn't make any sense. And the reason for that is another thing where aberrations are kind of set apart is their powers. Aberrants' powers are generally not fueled by magic. There are some that are also spellcasters, but usually they also have strange kind of powers that are inherent to them. Powers of telekinesis, abilities that are fueled by the strength of their mind. I saw Psychopath mentioned not too long ago. They're generally very smart compared to other monster types. Yes, they usually have high intelligences and also act in ways that aren't really befitting of how smart they are. I think a good example of that is like the Cloaker, which I think we'll talk about as well later, which is this super smart being that just kind of hangs around in caves and hunts people. And the last kind of thing about aberrations that I think really kind of set them apart as their beings is their intent. Usually when you encounter aberrations, they don't have a lot of, it's very unclear what aberrations' goals are. All of these strange creatures out of the Far Realm, they don't really have the same motivations and goals and desires that you would expect out of most other creatures. Like you look at a monster and you think, oh, it's trying to eat. You look at a mind flare and yeah, it's trying to eat, but what else is it trying to do?
Exactly. If a mind flayer simply wanted to eat, there are plenty of creatures it could just kill and eat very easily down in the Underdark. But it isn't looking for just any old thing. It's looking for incredibly smart creatures to kill and eat their brain. And this kind of intent feature, it follows again with that alien theme. These are things that when you see a beholder, right? When a beholder acts, its actions aren't things that players often can understand. Why did it do that? There's a disconnect that just doesn't follow logic. And this provides a very interesting conundrum and a very difficult challenge, but also a really fun playground for Dungeon Masters, where you can just have aberrations do things.
Yeah.
And that's fine, because in their inscrutable alien knowledge and wisdom, that is the choice. That is like what they would do.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
Yeah, it's a fun way to play.
Yeah, and I mean, that's part of what makes aberrations so great. Because of that, they can be extremely satisfying to play, often doing things that players don't really expect. And additionally, these creatures are unambiguously evil in almost every circumstance, right? They're either hunting people or eating their brains in the case of the Mind Flayer, or the Illithid, as some might know.
With almost every aberration, you just look at them and you know we need to get rid of whatever this thing is. It is obviously bad. The gibbering mouther, this pile of flesh with just tons of mouths and eyes just kind of sticking out of it. You look at it and you know, like, this thing doesn't want to become friends. It's not going to communicate with you. You need to kill it or it's going to kill you.
Yeah, exactly. And sorry, I was going to say, before we jump too far onto what makes them so great, I just wanted to talk one more thing about their powers. A lot of the times, some of the powers that aberrations have are even like beyond their understanding. And we'll get to that, especially when we're talking about the Beholder, who has some very interesting psychic or psionic kind of ability, which are super cool. But
Wyvern Soul asks if flumps are considered aberrations.
They are.
Jeremy can answer any questions you may have about
flumps. Are the only lawful good aberration. Go figure. Which is what makes them so amazing. But Pete, one of the greatest things about aberrations is that you can run this an aberration in basically any game, any campaign, anything you want to run, any one shot, and it can work, and you can just come up with whatever lore you find appropriate.
Yes.
You know?
The aberrations as this kind of thing that's part of the far realms, as these strange alien beings, they don't need to really tie in like a lot of other monsters do. And we kind of talked about this, a similar thing with the monstrosities, where, you know, say you have like a demonic incursion, aberrations, you know, if you have like a demonic incursion, you're going to see a demon and be like, oh, well, this is a problem if demons are showing up in the plane. With aberrations, you can just kind of throw them in. An example of this from Mordenkainen's Temple of Foes, and I believe it was the star, I'm forgetting the second word now.
Starspawn.
The Starspawn, thank you. Which are literally, they just come down in meteors. Like meteors that strike to the ground sometimes carry Starspawn, which is, I think, the most literal alien creature in there. And that's just something you can just toss in. You don't have to worry about how it affects the big picture of things, and you don't have to worry about like players associating it with major points of lore. Well, they're going to, you know, start to draw conclusions about aberrations and what's going on in your campaign by your inclusion of them.
Precisely. And one of the best things about that is because players don't have to draw that conclusion, when you do have something that ties in, like a greater eldritch entity that becomes like an enemy in the end game, right? That somehow ties together these aberrations you put in. That's really cool because players don't see that coming often. They see these aberrations appearing and it's just like, oh, it's a mind flayer. It just lives in this dungeon. Like, that's just where it is. It's in the Underdark, where mind flayer's in the Underdark. Or, oh yeah, a meteor crashed down. Yeah, that's how Starspawn show up. That's just, no one knows why, but that's just what they are. And then, you know, later in the game, when a literal star comes to like consume the multiverse, that becomes like a cool, like, holy shit, that meant something.
Yeah, you
really
see cool. On the star, there's just thousands and thousands of these Starspawn that are like kind of writhing around as was the first sign of an invasion.
But yeah, you can do all sorts of cool stuff.
I like psychopath comment. The DM, I place one aberration face down and end my turn. Man, don't tell them that you're placing the aberration face down. They'll know how to counter it. Another thing.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say another thing about aberrations. That's cool. They're spooky. Aberrations are scary. If you want to do kind of a darker vibe, if you want to get that Lovecraftian horror, fear of the unknown, fear of the things that you cannot understand, aberrations are a great place to turn to for that kind of style. I don't know. I mentioned the Gibbering Mouther before for this, and I've never met a player who, when they see a Gibbering Mouther, is not intimidated by a huge pile of flesh with just random mouths and eyes on it. It is
just scary.
Yeah. Of all the monsters in the monster manual, I think it is the number one thing that is the number one most terrifying monster in the game. Like, if I met that thing in real life, I would always only run from it.
Yeah, oh, exactly. And by the way, thank you, Exhausted RS, for your follow. We super appreciate your support.
Indeed, thank you.
But part of actually what Pete was saying, right? What makes these guys so good, what makes Aberrations so great as enemies to use, is they make fantastic villains. Like Pete was mentioning earlier, most Aberrations are incredibly intelligent. They have a cognizance, a sense of understanding that most other creatures don't have. Certain ones, like Mind Flayers, can bend and warp reality in ways that are just really cool. They interact with game mechanics in ways that just that other creatures can't. And we'll talk about that more when we talk about the Beholder, specifically with its anti-magic cone. But the fact that these aberrations are intelligent, they're, for the most part, aware of their abilities, it makes them very hard to predict. And it's just really cool and a lot of fun to play with when you're actually running Aberration. So let's talk about where we really see these aberrations. I mean, the number one place that people put aberrations, right, that dungeon masters use aberrations, is in the Underdark, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or maybe in dungeons, but we'll talk about the Underdark first.
Yeah. So the Underdark, for anyone who is unfamiliar with it, is essentially, it is when you dig too deep. It is just a series of underground interconnected caverns and just space that is deep beneath the earth, where creatures that, relish the darkness, relish these kind of just dank and small spaces, live and thrive. Creatures like the Drow, the Dwergar, live deep in the Underdark, and if you keep going down low enough, eventually you start to find where almost all aberrations live. Most aberrations prefer these kind of dark spaces. A lot of them kind of make use of these kind of spaces in their abilities. Creatures that hunt in the darkness. It is the most common place. Mind Flayers in particularly are actually specifically, they don't go out in the sun. They specifically only exist in the Underdark. That is like their preferred climate.
Yep. And that's just really cool because the Underdark is already a mysterious, almost alien place. An interwoven series of underground passageways that just go seemingly forever deeper and deeper. That feels it's the perfect home for these kind of monsters. But another great home for them is in dungeons. You can have aberrations pretty much wherever you want them. Pete just said, well, Mind Flayers prefer to stay underground in the dark. That's true. But you could absolutely have a Mind Flayer in a dungeon, just in any tomb or whatever. Mind Flayers being very intelligent creatures, Beholders being very intelligent creatures. You could have a workshop or a laboratory or some kind of twisted experimental area that these creatures have inhabited or have created in this dungeon. And that can be just a really cool way to add them in wherever you want them. And of course, just having aberrations in the dungeon on its own right, even if you don't make it tailored toward them, it's just like, well, why the hell are these things here? It asks that question, like, how did the aliens get here?
And it also kind of floats back into what we were talking about before with intent of these creatures. It's strange. If the creature's there, it probably has a reason that either is a good reason or reason that it at least believes is a good reason for being there. Maybe it's there for the same reason that you are. Maybe the Mind Flayer also needs to kill the ancient lich that resides within this dungeon for whatever, because that will advance whatever strange goal this Mind Flayer is working towards, which you will probably never fully get. But I was going to say, one more great place that you can really meet aberrations and that it feels right for them to just kind of appear is in planar travel. Aberrations are these beings that kind of transcend space in a lot of way. Just by their very nature, they are not from this region. So it doesn't seem in that way all that implausible that they could be in any space within the material plane, the inner and outer planes. I think of like something that we were talking about in Mortal Kombat Time of Foes recently, the city with the Githzerai, the Githyanki. I can picture aberrations being all over the Githyanki city, just kind of floating through the astral plane, conducting whatever strange astral business they have.
Exactly. Those are incredibly good places. Or Sigil, if you're running a campaign in kind of the Spelljammer kind of setting. Those are also that's also a great place to kind of put these but yeah, and actually one thing I just wanted to make a point of, everything that Pete and I are talking about right now are our opinions, and we're talking about kind of classic Dungeons and Dragons. In your own game, you can do whatever you want with these guys, and that's totally fine. Psychopath 23 in chat saying, in one of my games, a beholder is a shopkeeper. And that is totally fine. Like, most people, when they play beholders, and I'm saying this now because we're going to jump right into beholders in a second, but many beholders are treated as kind of almost schizophrenic or very ultra paranoid kind of creatures. But they work in crazy, mysterious, ridiculous alien ways. So you can absolutely have a beholder that's a shopkeeper. That kind of logic, just the logic that these creatures work in alien ways and think in alien ways, means you can do literally anything with an aberration, and it's okay. Like, it works. So let's talk about the Beholder first. Beholder, it's probably the most classic, besides maybe the Mind Flayer, is the most classic aberration there is. If you own a copy of I don't have it behind me, it's over on my desk.
The Monster Manual.
The Monster Manual for Dungeons and Dragons. You've seen a Beholder. It basically looks like a giant meatball with a bunch of tentacles with eyes at the end of those tentacles. It shoots laser beams out of those eyes. And
there it is.
Pete's got his back there, exactly. And beholders are amazing because, like I had mentioned, beholders tend to be ultra paranoid creatures. Their body is just totally alien, but they have some really, they have a lot of really cool quirks, and you can make this creature into an excellent villain if you want to use one in your game. So a great way to do that, right, is your adventuring party, right, starts to investigate around near its lair, and the beholder sends creatures to look at you, to investigate you, not to attack you, right? Because it needs to know, are these a threat? Are these going to attack me? How will I defeat them if they come at me? It needs information. It wants to know, not just to kill you beforehand because it's too terrified. It's paranoid enough to think you might kill my minions. So if I send my minions against you now, then you'll kill them and I won't know anything about your ability. But if I send my minions to scout on you and then run back and report it, then, and this is how the beholder's mind works, in 1,000,000 miles per minute. And when the players are out adventuring in the Underdark, right, and they see a bunch of, I don't know, let's say there are kobolds or Darrow, right, tiny little insane gnomes live in the Underdark that have been lorded over by this beholder. And the Darrow showed up, and the players have been attacked by Darrow throughout the entirety of their adventure in the Underdark. And these Darrow show up, and they're just watching. And they go to attack them, and the Darrow back off, but then they come back to watch. And the party gets really confused. It's why are the enemies that we've seen just randomly attack us acting in this mysterious way? And it's a cool other side, right, to how monsters work. This isn't a monster that's just trying to just kill you. It's a monster that, can I use you, right? What can I learn about you to my advantage?
And beholders are extremely varied. I've never seen two people do a beholder the same way. And that even kind of comes across in their mechanics. The thing that I think everyone really loves about the battle with the beholder, once you, assuming you come into conflict with it, which most of the time if there's a beholder, you don't end up being allies with it, at least not forever, maybe for a time. But usually it's going to end in some kind of battle with the beholder. And it has what might be the coolest, maybe the most inspired set of mechanics in all of Dungeons and Dragons, which it uses its eye rays. It has these 10 different eyes that stick off of it, and these smaller eyes, each of them has its own beam that does a unique thing. Some of them disintegrate when they shoot. Some of them burn. Some of them kind of draw the life out of you. One of them just picks you up and moves you around. It uses telekinesis, one charms. So it has all of these different eye rays that do all of these different things. And it does so randomly, for one thing, which kind of also expresses the madness of the creature. Like, it's all over the place. It implies in the monster manual that the beholder knows how to use its eye rays individually and when it wants to. For example, it uses its disintegrate ray to like carve out perfect caverns for itself, and that is that's just a really cool way to battle this foe who's using its abilities just kind of seemingly sporadically, but because it has this alien mind and it understands things in ways that you do not. This is like kind of the right way to just use its ability, which is it's very interesting, this kind of encounter, and it'll make a great fight almost every time. Another cool thing, another cool way to kind of harbinge a beholder, I feel like if players are familiar with the beholder, like a lot of the mythic creatures that we discussed with monstrosities, because in the context of D&D, the beholder is essentially like a mythical creature. It's a thing that people want to at some point be like, oh yeah, we fought the beholder. Players who are kind of in on that, you can, for example, show them a lair where the rooms are arranged vertically and there's just big circular holes in the floors to move between rooms. A situation like there's no stairs, there's no sort of ladders or any way to move between floors, just these big holes in the center of the room that are perfectly circular. And either they figure out, like, after they've spent some time, because I don't think anyone will instantly make that connection, they'll figure out, oh, this wasn't made for people. Or they don't, and then they'll see the beholder and be like, we should have known!
Yeah, exactly. One of the things we mentioned earlier is, and we talked about this a little bit, but the fact that a beholder has absolute perfect control over all of its eyes. The fact that in its mechanics, you roll to see which eye beam it uses on a turn, that's not a balance option, albeit some of the eye beams are stronger than others. That is just to represent the bizarre mentality of the beholder. It could just use its laser, its disintegrate beam every single turn. But the crazy, absurd logic of it is this creature and its inscrutable intelligence believes that, no, my charm ray is the idea to use this turn. And you as a dungeon master say, like, no, but the paladin has, like, 3 dexterity, disintegrate him every turn. But no, but the beholder says, and its inscrutable wisdom knows better than you, dungeon master. And yeah, speaking of mechanics,
I was going to say, do you want to talk about the Spectrator a little bit while we're on the subject?
Well, speaking of beholder mechanics, we haven't even touched on its anti-magic cone.
Oh, I forgot about the cone.
One of the coolest thing a beholder can do, or has, is its center eye, the big eye that's on its meatball body that isn't on any eye stalks. It projects a cone of anti-magical energy in front of it. Nothing is more terrifying for a party than, you're walking into this cavern, you look around, you don't see anything, and suddenly you're magically light plate armor weighs heavy on your shoulders. And they're like, did the magic stop? What happened? It's like, yeah, the magic stopped. And it takes the party a second to realize, like, oh, fuck. And then the beholder just comes in, guns a-blazing. And, there's just a cool touch that can be added. Oftentimes, if you're playing beholders with, like, their whole layer and everything, the beholder knows you're coming. They've planned for you to come. There's almost no way they're not going to get that ambush, because they have just planned and plotted, unless they want a monologue, because maybe the beholder wants to monologue. Maybe it does. I don't know, man. Beholders work in mysterious ways.
What's your favorite? I guess there's one beholder that you wouldn't want to talk about that you've run, Jeremy. Do you have a favorite quirk you've given a beholder, though?
Well, yeah, actually, and I'm going to talk about that specific beholder, but in very vague terms. One of the things I love about beholders is because they're alien creatures in the most literal sense. You can have beholders in your game that are from other worlds, other realities. You can have very meta beholders. It's like, yes, this beholder is from New York City. No, really. He lived in the sewers in New York City. And, like, you can play to that in your game. Your very, like, classic medieval fantasy game. And you have your beholder talking like a New York cabbie, having his minions running around doing all sorts of stuff. And it's just awesome that it has that kind of freedom, right? It's not just from another plane, it's from an entirely different existence. And that is, in my opinion, my favorite thing to do with beholder.
My favorite beholder I've ran, I had him, his favorite quirk of mine, at least. And, he did a lot of other beholdery things, but he kidnapped a player at one point and just had him at a cage and was just kind of staring at him, presumably for hours, until he eventually woke up in the cage. And what he was hearing as he was waking up was the beholder just going, "I am Xenantax. I am Xenantax. I am Xenantax," and just saying it over and over again until he eventually woke up and responded. He would just repeat things at people until he got responses. And my player was laughing for 2 minutes while I was just there, just saying that over and over again until he got tired of it and actually responded. But it's just a fun quirk. And I think when I think of beholders, I always think of them as having something like that. That's just, now this thing's at least a little crazy.
And a great example is for those who have been following all the spoilers for the new Dungeons and Dragons book, in Waterdeep Dragon Heist, there is a prominent potential NPC in that adventure who is a beholder by the name of the Xanathar. You might be familiar from Xanathar's Guide to Everything. And his quirk is he loves his goldfish. He doesn't care about anything else in all of existence except for his goldfish. And that just is amazing.
Yeah.
The dumb little quirk there. I love the idea, right, of this beholder doing his thing, whatever the hell he decides, or he or she, they, beholders don't have any gender. What am I talking about? Whatever the hell they think is what they want to do. And then their goldfish dies. And all of their minions are like, "Oh my god, we got a new goldfish," before he notices. Oh my goodness. And there's this amazing, like, freak out of, we gotta get this beholder a new goldfish before everything goes to hell. And it's just awesome.
There's so much more I could just talk about with beholder. I'm like, I keep having stuff I want to say, but let's move on. On the subject of beholders,
I want to talk about another beholder.
Spectators.
The spectator is a different beholder. In D&D, there are a whole series of different beholder creatures. There's the Mind Witness, the Gauth, the Gazer, and the Spectator. And those are really, they're all different kind of takes on the same idea of the big body with the mouth and the eye and tentacles, but they all function in very different ways. Some of them are more, how do I put them, like, weird or far out, kind of feel more dreamlike, where other ones feel like, actually, Cardwatch saying in chat, the Death Tyrant feel a little more brutal and kind of grounded to this reality. But the Spectator is a weird kind of outlier. because the spectator is a summoned creature. It's a created creature. It's not something that is necessarily alien. It looks like a beholder. It's got a big mouth, it's got a big singular eye, and it's got 4 tentacles that come off of it, each with eyes at the end. But the spectator was created, or it was really summoned, but created and bound to a specific place by a powerful spellcaster, like a wizard. And spectators, I love the concept of them because A, you can use them anywhere. Any dungeon you're playing, put a spectator in. Why not? He's just been there forever. The wizard who made him centuries ago is dead, and he's just here and he's crazy now. Or you can tie that in much more, or not much more interesting ways, but different ways. So, like, let's say your party runs into that spectator in the dungeon, and they defeat them. And as they're looting around, your party wizard finds an old spell book. And in that spell book contains the ritual used by the wizard to create the spectator. Ooh, that's cool. Maybe now your character wants to try and summon a spectator. That wizard now has like a long-term goal tied to this. I can summon this powerful beholder-like guardian for our lair. And that's just awesome because that is now a long-term goal that's not going to affect your party in combat because the spectator is inherently a guardian. Other things about spectators is the logic behind them is they don't have an understanding of time because time doesn't work in the same way in the Far Realm. And so a spectator doesn't realize that it's been 2,000 years and the human wizard that summoned them died 1,900 years ago. They're just totally mad at this point because they've been sitting in this tiny little dungeon waiting for their master to come back with the milk. So, like, they're just totally berserk. And you can do a lot of really cool things. For those familiar with High Rollers D&D, if you watched their first campaign, one of the creatures they ran into right at the beginning, or right near the beginning, was a bizarre spectator who was convinced that he was an evil chained god named Tharisdan, and that he had an invisible friend named Bahamut, who was a giant platinum dragon who he was best friends with. And it was this really cool moment where the players are talking to this insane creature that thinks it's an evil god that hangs out with Bahamut the dragon. And it's just this crazy, bizarre, like, holy shit, this thing is mad. And it's just awesome. It's just a cool, engaging way to show your players, yeah, man, this is bizarre. And speaking of bizarre, Pete, unless there's something you want to talk about the Beholder, I figured I'd throw it to you for the Nothic.
I was gonna take it for the Nothic, actually, was my plan as well. The Nothic is possibly, I don't want to give up my boy the Rakshasa, but the Nothic might be my favorite thing in the monster manual. And it is an aberration. What it looks like, it's a little bit more humanoid. Its skin, 2 arms, 2 legs. Its skin are these kind of strange, like brown gray, like spines and kind of scales. It's kind of unclear what material the body of the creature is made out of. And has this one, almost like a beholder, it has this one huge glowing eye out of which it can shoot like a big kind of beam. And Nothics are great for that eye. That aesthetic thing is you're kind of in the Underdark, and then you just kind of describe to your players, you see a huge glowing eye in the darkness, and they're like, behold there! And then it's a tiny Nothic, which isn't actually that scary of a threat. Which is just kind of a fun joke to play on your players. But the thing that I love about fun.
Anything with just one eye, that's so much fun. They're like, oh god! And then, oh wait, never mind. But then they're like, wait, no, that's fucked up. Never mind. I'm worried about that too. Sorry, go ahead.
No problem. The thing that really makes the Nothic for me, though, like I said, they have this eye ray. They speak Undercommon, but the Nothic really shines when they're not an enemy, but someone that the players have to interact with and work with. Either they have to get information from the Nothic, they have to travel with the Nothic, maybe for some reason they have to help the creature. But Nothics have this ability that's called Weird Insight, which what that ability does is You can tell a player to make a deception check, which will confuse them because they haven't said anything. But what's happening is the Nothic is using their weird insight on them. And once they do so, they gain a piece of information about that player. Specifically, it specifies that they gain a secret about that player, something that they don't necessarily want for this creature to know, which opens up a ton of possibilities from a role-playing
Just a second,
standpoint.
Pete. I just want to point out fact or secret.
A fact
With their
or
weird
secret.
insight, the Nothic can learn things about characters that they don't know.
Yeah.
Which I love. I actually just recently used Nothics in a campaign that I'm running. And the Nothics, like, the party was in a situation where they were spent. They were out of abilities. So they weren't going to just kill these things. And there was just this really creepy back and forth. They were trying to negotiate their way past the Nothics. And the Nothics are just reading them for everything they've got. Like, ooh, you're interesting. And it was just really... the players are still kind of grappling with some of the truths the Nothics.
I had a Nothic once that my players encountered in an old abandoned laboratory, and it was kind of in this weird standoff because the laboratory had been left by its master a very long time ago, and there was a homunculus that was trying to protect it, and this Nothic who was imprisoned there that was trying to take all of the magic items within and leave, because Nothics are part of their lore as they're attracted to the remnants of powerful magic. But they go in there and the players ended up killing the homunculus, and now they're speaking to this Nothic. And the Nothic uses weird insight on one of the players and learns a piece of information about them. And then his whole plan just all of a sudden changes, because he knows he can't win because he's one little thing and these are 4 very powerful adventurers. As they're speaking to, one of our players can speak Undercommon, and the Nothic learns instantly about this player. One of the just things about this character at the time was that he was the last of a family of 8. He had 8 brothers and sisters, and he was the only one still living, not necessarily for tragic reasons, just for sad reasons. And this Nothic instantly just says to this player after learning this, I have been separated from my family. You know what it means to feel lost, do you not? To this specific person who has this thing, and it's just that person is now just...
yeah.
Yes, I do. And now it's their ally, and he's going to just do whatever he can and learn as much about these people to manipulate them and get what he wants out of them, get away, take their magic stuff. It's such a cool thing. I absolutely adore the Nothic.
And that's one of the best things about the Nothic is their motivation. They are a monster that has a very specific and clear motivation. Totally opposite to Beholder, whose motivations are bizarre and inscrutable.
Yeah.
The Nothic... motivation is to gain more knowledge and magic by any means necessary. A really cool thing to do with Nothics is have them be information brokers. Oh, you want to know something about someone? Well, the Nothic might know it. You have some magic items to trade him. Having this kind of like back and forth, or having the Nothics being like the servants, right, of some powerful higher being. I know traditionally in the Greyhawk setting, Nothics are servants of Vecna. They're creatures that serve
makes a ton of sense.
Master of Secrets, this arch-lich deity. And, like, that's just so freaking cool!
Oh, yeah.
And, of course, in the Faerun Forgotten Realms example, Nothics are created from wizards who have delved too deep into too dark secrets and lost themselves to their... bizarre and inscrutable knowledge that they have learned, this cursed knowledge.
Great monster.
Awesome.
Highly recommend.
Yeah, exactly. They're just radical.
Jeremy, want to talk about flumps?
Sure. For those who aren't familiar with flumps, I love flumps. Flumps are basically, they're floating jellyfish. They're generally depicted as kind of a pale yellow with yellow kind of gradient transitioning down to blue at the tip tentacles. The tentacles have little little barbs on them, and they have a big mouth on the top of their jellyfish head, 2 little eye stalks with 2 goofy little eyes. And Flumps get their name from the kind of flump sound they make as they shoot air out of their underside to keep afloat. Flumps are hilarious. First, they are the only lawful good aberration, I believe, to date. They have existed since, I believe, the first monster manual. I think it was like Fiendfolia or something. But they were they're from the very beginning of Dungeons and Dragons, and they're awesome. They're just very friendly creatures. One of the things about them is they thrive off of psionic energy. And so oftentimes you'll find flumps near where you'll find like beholders or mind flayers. You'll find them near these other aberrations. And flumps in your game can make excellent NPCs. The players are traveling through the Underdark. They've been berated by Blaze, by Umber Hulks, by Deragar, and now they've stumbled upon Mind Flayers, and everything seems like it could not get any worse. But a shine of light. The dumb jellyfish creature flumps towards you. Greets you with its telepath. No, they're incredibly smart. Greets you with dumb looking. Greets you with its telepathic bond, and warns you of the Mind Flayers up ahead. Right. Helps to guide you through the Underdark. They make excellent allies in this most dangerous of places. Additionally,
I was going to say, one thing I like about flumps is the potential that I think flumps have for when you see them. I mean, the description that Jeremy gave, if you didn't have the context for what it actually is, you could very easily think, foul beast to be slain, and you go up to like the first flump and just cleft it in twain, and then you have a colony of very sad, very just running away from you creatures that you've now have made this horrible moral decision where you've slain an innocent flump.
Exactly. And flumps have a lot of cool quirks to them. One of the early editions, they had the ability to like change their colors based on their emotions, right? They can sense the emotions in other creatures, so they know to not approach creatures with evil in their hearts. And one of the things that I really dig about flumps is they're actually incredibly smart. They live in little colonies called cloisters, where there's no like one leader flump, but every flump contributes to the success of the cloister in their own way. And they have advanced knowledge of like philosophy and religion and also in mathematics and such, which make them really interesting kind of creatures. You can have them literally anywhere. You can have them in some ancient temple to a forgotten god that they still worship and maintain. You can have them in an old ruined dwarven city where they are continuing the dwarves' mechanical contraptions to build their crazy giant dwarf robot to beat up the Mind Flayers. Like, you can do that, and that's okay, and that makes perfect sense through the lore of the flump, because they're just ridiculous, goofy creatures like that. Personally, I love the idea of the party making friends with some flumps, learning that they live in this dwarf city, not really going to check it out, going to fight the Mind Flayers, getting captured by the Mind Flayers, then being rescued by flumps in a giant dwarf mech suit. That just sounds great to me. It's goofy, it's fun, and flumps make excellent comic relief in one of the darkest settings in Dungeons & Dragons. Dark. I love flumps. They're so
Jeremy loves flump. Please note, if you have not already, Jeremy's screen name here, DnDTime Jeremy, in parentheses, trust a flump. Also, do you want to mention trusting flumps?
Yeah, always trust a flump. That's all I'm going to say.
Whose quote is it? Is it Mordenkainen?
I don't know. Always trust a flump. That's all.
Yeah, just always trust a flump. Just a dungeoneering survival guide. Always trust. Yeah,
Dungeoneer's adage: always trust a flump. So we're kind of running a little short on time. We got about 10 minutes left, but we have a whole slew of monsters. I think we can probably cut one of them at least.
I would like to do the Intellect Devourer next.
Oh, never mind. I guess we're not cutting any of them. Pete, go ahead and take on the Intellect Devourer. Tell our friends what the most terrifying monster in Dungeons and Dragons.
I mean, maybe we can cut. I don't care that much about this guy, but I like him, but the Intellect Devourer is awesome. I'll go quick. It is a brain with legs. That's literally what it is. I'm not underselling it. It's like a brain, and it's got 4 little legs that come out of it. They're kind of like claws. That's That's it. And what it does is it tries to take the place of other things' brains. It eats their intellect. In so doing, it presumably absorbs their knowledge, it learns, and it just kind of exists. And they make great minions of more powerful aberrations. I can always picture a beholder keeping a bunch of intellect devourers around. I can definitely picture mind flayers keeping a bunch of intellect devourers around to go out and devour some intellects for them. And they are mechanically absolute nightmares. Card Pocket says they burrow into your skull. So what the mind flayer does is
than that. They teleport into your skull.
Oh, God.
It's worse.
What they do is they shoot you with this big psychic blast, which reduces your intelligence massively. So if you're playing a barbarian, for example, and you got that nice, you took that intellect dump stat and you're up against a intellect devourer, you roll 3d6 and you reduce your intelligence by the total amount rolled. And if that's more than what your intelligence is, so if you roll, say, on 3d6 more than the 8 of this barbarian, that creature's intellect becomes 0, which means they can do nothing for a very long time until you do some kind of spell to get it back. And then they teleport into your head and you're just dead. And now they're piloting your body as a terrifying brain in a body. So yeah, like they work good in minions. You got the brain in the glass jar was something that Card Pocket mentioned before. They're scary at all levels, which is great.
For an enemy that is allegedly challenge rating 2, a level 20 barbarian dies to 4 of these.
Yep.
Almost guaranteed.
But I would like to tell you what my favorite version of an intellect devourer is. My favorite way to use an intellect devourer. And I've done this a couple times now. And it's always worked really well when players have reacted exactly the way that I was hoping they would with it. And that is, they have some NPC that they've followed into a rhythm with and that they've grown to like. Maybe it's a bartender, or maybe, like, you know, they work at a bar and they have a customer that comes in every day, and every day they walk in and say, one of the players, "Another day, another dollar, huh?" and order an ale. And every day it's "Another day, another dollar, huh?" and order an ale. And then one day they come in and say, "Another day, another dollar. I would like an ale." And every time the players are like, You good?" "Yes, I am fine." And you can just like, it just like puts them off guard, and now there's this horrible monster. And then that also, you know, there's lots of storytelling that you can do with why this person was taken over, and they probably were trying to get specifically to you. But yeah, I love the intellect devourer.
Yeah, and those make fantastic, like people are saying, minions. So let's say you've got your beholder or your mind flayer, right? And your mind flayer is trying to like infiltrate the power structure of this town or city. And the mind flayer is just slowly but surely inserting their intellect devourers into the hierarchy of the people that are ruling, until eventually the mind flayer is puppet running the whole government, because the king's got an intellect devourer in his head, the queen's got an intellect, and everyone's just cool intellect devoured. It makes a really interesting kind of side option. And if the enemies are particularly smart, maybe they mislead you. It works in interesting ways and make you do the dirty work of killing the king who isn't intellect devoured for them, because all the intellect devourers are just steering you toward, yes, the king's an imposter. But you can do some crazy stuff with this. It can just be really cool.
It's cool. Probably got time for one more if you want to do one more, Jeremy.
Yeah, so everyone's heard of the Mind Flayer. I'm actually not, well, you know, we'll talk about Flayer. It's so iconic. If you know Lovecraft, if you know Dungeons and Dragons, you know the Mind Flayer. It is a large humanoid creature, bunch of tentacles coming off its face, kind of looks like Davy Jones from Pirates of the Caribbean. And it puts those tentacles on your head, cracks open your skull with its beak, and sucks out your brain. That is an intellect, that is a Mind Flayer. It has a psychic blast where it can project its psychic energies and stun people, which, again, because it's versus intelligence, and a lot of characters end up with a lower intelligence, this ends up devastating and being super dangerous to a lot of those. Yes, my party is 4 barbarians and a cleric.
I will never need intelligence.
Yeah, it very powerful against what usually ends up being some very strong party types. The Mind Flayer is straight out of a horror movie. Like,
Yeah.
it's just, you can just see this shadow, right, coming down the hallway of the big tentacles just, or worse, right? You see the person struggling against the creature, their shadow on the back wall, as the tentacles wrap over them. They're like, no, no. And then there's just silence and a crack. And then a slurping sound, and the body slumps to the floor. Like, it's terrifying. I very
think they are
little
the most.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think they're the most like aberrant. Like we were talking about before, like they are weird in form. The Mind Flayer, weird tentacle head, definitely alien in form. Intent, Mind Flayer's got all kinds of business. Power, they use this weird, strange abilities of like these psychic blasts that have nothing to do with magic. They are like the textbook definition of an aberration.
Except Mind Flayers can also learn magic, which is terrifying. Mind Flayers have like incredibly rich lore, which is very different from most other aberrations. In that Mind Flayers in the Forgotten Realms once ruled the entire multiverse. They flew around on spaceships between all these different planes. They were eventually toppled and have now hidden in the Underdark, and that's why you find them there. They're in a kind of a seclusion, trying to not be destroyed. But like the kind of theme behind them is they once ruled everything. This ultra powerful psionic race. Anything that you find with psionics at all in Dungeons and Dragons, I mean, with like maybe one or two exceptions, was it somehow affected by the Mind Flayers. Durgar are a race of dark dwarves live in the Underdark. Their psionic abilities came to them because they were enslaved by Mind Flayers for centuries. The Darrow are mad, insane gnomes that are in the Underdark. Very similar deals. You look at the Oblex, which is a really cool ooze that was added in Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes that has a super high intelligence, which is strange for an ooze, and psionic abilities. And that is because it is from Mind Flayer experiments. Mind Flayers are the cause of all of this psionic chaos in the kind of classic Forgotten Realms D&D setting. And they make excellent villains because they have this drive for power. And of course, there's more we could talk about with those guys and the Elder Brains and stuff. But if you want to learn more about that, maybe we'll do a video on Mind Flayers at some point in the far future if you guys really want. And yeah, I mean, a couple more super classic ones super quickly. Gibbering Mouth, or Pete talked about earlier. A terrifying amalgamation of eyes and mouth. It's got really cool mechanics in that it causes creatures within a certain radius to go insane if they can see it. It actually causes reality to warp and deform around it, creating like a weird difficult terrain feature where players like physically can't move because the ground is pulling them toward the Gibbering Mouther. It's just a fucking terrifying thing, and at very low levels, this is a big monster to put in. Especially, I mean, I want to keep on just going and going, but I'll say one last thing, and then I'll throw it off to you, Pete, to finish us off for today. But one of the things you can do with the Gibbering Mouth, or I've seen Farfel in chat did this, and it was amazing, is you can have lesser creatures. So the Gibbering Mouther, compared with other aberrations, is not really smart. It's got intelligence of 3. It is this being of chaos and consumption. It must consume. And one of the things that he did in his game is he took the Gibbering Mouther that was kind of captured by these other creatures and worshipped as a god. And so these other creatures were driven insane by the creature that they were worshiping, and they were capturing other creatures in the Underdark and throwing them to the Mouther as like sacrifices and stuff. And this makes a really excellent like cult like feel from very low level monsters. Like you can just have really goblins or kobolds and roll with that, and it works. And it's just sweet.
Yeah.
Pete, do we want to even talk about the cloaker, or do we want to leave that one off for now?
Yeah, I don't think it's important. I like it. I mean, I'll just say what it is. Cloaker, it's like a manta ray. But it's like an aberrant manta ray that hangs on the ceiling and drops down off of the ceiling in caves and eats you up. Yum, yum, good. But it's also pretty intelligent, and it like communicates with other cloakers, and they share like hunting plans and stuff like that. So it's I don't know, I think it's an interesting combination of being this like really primitive and simplistic in the way it lives and what it does, but while it still has this aberrant intelligence. It's cool.
And I have one last thing, because Card Pocket brought it up in chat. Kuatoa. So Kuatoa are they're not very interesting when you look at them. They're reverse mermaids. Like, you got human body legs, big fish head.
Great race.
Hilarious. I love them. But one of the things about Kuatoa is they're an aberrant creature. Technically, I think they're actually humanoid, but they're like aberrations in a lot of ways. And compared to like the Beholder, they both have a really unique and interesting kind of background feature. The Kuatoa are important in the D&D universe because the Kuatoa, after being enslaved by mind flayers and gaining their psionic, kind of existence, their insanity, because they're all crazy, actually believed so hard in this deity that didn't exist that it came into being. Their combined psionic oneness created a god named Blip-to-Bloop. Blip-to-Bloop. Sorry. Blip-to-Bloop.
I was kind of like a bloop,
Blip-to-Bloop, which is a crazy lobster goddess thing. And
yeah, look it up online.
To cause things to come into being from simply thought is one of a really cool and alien aspect of aberrations in general. The Kuatoa do it, and the Beholder does it. When the Beholder dreams, things that it dreams become reality. That is how new Beholders come into existence. From the dreams of an existing Beholder.
Just dreams other Beholders.
Which, it's just like, that's what I was talking about way earlier when I said they have abilities that they don't even understand. They're so alien. If a Beholder could lucid dream, a Beholder could create anything. It could warp the world in its image. And that thought is just too good.
Very, very spooky.
But I think we'll leave it at that. Because
I was going to say, I think that's going to do us for today. We thank you all very much for hanging out and talking some D&D with us. That's it. We love you and we appreciate it.
Yeah, I had a great time. I love talking about these monsters and these monster fights. But let us know if you like watching it. Let us know in the chat or on Discord. It's a great way to get in touch with us.
Yeah.
Tell us what you want to see on these shows.
You can just if you have ideas for stuff for the week, just PM us and be like, yo, I want to talk about this.
Just type it straight in the chat, right? And other people will be like, oh yeah, me too.
Do it in the hangout, whatever. Just let us know. Tell us.
Yeah, I mean, if you feel anxious, of course, feel free to PM us. But
yeah, that was my thought. I don't know. That's about I think that's about it. Friday, tune in to Pete and Jeremy's D&D Time. You know it probably. I'm gonna go ahead today and just assume that you all already know what it is. But it starts at 9:00, and we play Dungeons and Dragons. If you don't, 9:00 Eastern Standard Time.
Yeah, 3 1-hour-long one-shot adventures featuring you guys. Today's the last night to sign up, so if you haven't signed up, head on to our website, DnDTime.stream, and do that. But yeah,
there's
should be a ton of fun. I'm really excited. I mean, I'm always excited about D&D Time, but
there might not be there might not be a D&D Time Talks next week. That is
it's kind of iffy,
up in the air. If there is not, there will still be a stream. If Jeremy is unable to make it, I will stream something. I do not know what that will be yet, but that is set up so that I can do that now. So we'll do something next Wednesday, but it might not be talks. So heads up now, we'll keep you posted.
But it also might be. We'll let you know. If we do talks, I think we're in line to talk about Undead, which
it's a big one.
Needs some talking.
Yeah, that's
I think it could use some talking about. But we'll find out. We'll let you guys know at the very latest by Sunday, which of course Sunday is Saturday and Sunday. We're gonna have D&D time behind the scene and behind the screen.
Oh,
and
yes.
D&D time delves. In Saturday's D&D time behind the screen, I will be creating the one-shot adventure that players are going to be running or playing in on Sunday's game of D&D time delves. D&D time delves is a 3-hour, roughly one-shot adventure DM'd by me and played usually by a consistent cast of characters. But this week, we've got some special guests. This week, we have 2 D&D timers who will be playing with us. Pete, I don't think we've announced this yet, and I don't think it's actually gotten out. So I just want to say 2 of our oldest players who've been with us since pretty much the get-go of D&D.
Yeah, pretty much the beginning.
A ton to contribute to the D&D time community, to bring players in, and to just really be a positive force. We have Switch, otherwise Adrian P. in the Twitch chat. I don't think he's here right now, but he's going to be playing with us on Friday. And Xandaril, you probably know him as Kurogan, or Cho'Gall, or any number of his plethora of characters in D&D time.
Infinite number of characters he's created. And then our last player is going to be a fellow streamer who some of you, I think, are already familiar with, and we've mentioned him a couple times, but we're going to be playing with Maddie Morgs, who runs a stream on his channel, Maddie Morgs. He's going to be joining us as our 4th, so it should be a lot of fun. We're excited about it.
Yeah, I'm super stoked about it. It should be pretty awesome.
Do you have are you doing another crowdsourced one, or are you going to do a regular delve?
No, I'm going to be doing a regular delve. I'll probably be messing with some stuff, so stay tuned for Saturday. It should be fun, but I'm not doing a full crowdsourced delve this week, just because we've got a different cast than usual. I just want to be a little more solid of a base, a little more grounded. But anywho,
yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for hanging out.
Indeed.
We super appreciate your support. And I'm Jeremy.
And I'm Pete. And this is
D&D.